Hellraiser. Never have I seen a series with so many movies that progressively outdo the previous film. In terms of terribleness, that is. I already spoke about the first two movies back in 2021, and I believe that those are honestly best in show for the series, with the caveat being that I haven't seen the latest film. But given how bad some of the later films are, I'm not in a rush to go see it. In any case, I do want to talk about another Hellraiser movie. Hellraiser 3 and 4 are pretty good choices, but I don't put those near 1 and 2. So I'm actually turning to the direct-to-video sequels instead. Odd, yes, but hear me out. I'm going to discuss Hellraiser Inferno. Inferno is considered terrible by many critics, but I actually think it's one of the better direct-to-video sequels that was released. Hellraiser Inferno centers around a corrupt detective named Joe Thorne. Detective Thorne loves to give in to his desires of drugs and sex, and all during working hours. Anyway, he goes to a murder scene that looks ritualistic. He discovers the puzzle box and swipes it. You know, there's something about that box that makes people crazy for puzzles. I don't think that has ever been explained, but it has been a while since I've seen these films, so I could be wrong. Maybe Hellraiser Bloodlines talks about it since that film goes over the creation of the box, but people really seem to love puzzles in these movies. Anyway, back to Hellraiser Inferno. Detective Thorne takes the puzzle box home and solves it. Normally, this leads to the gates of hell opening up, but unlike the previous films, solving the puzzle box does not immediately summon Pinhead or any other demon. I think that's what I really like about this movie, but more on that in a little bit. What happens is, Detective Thorne becomes plagued with strange visions and hallucinations. He also manages to connect the ritual murder with a killer called the Engineer. The film plays out like a detective story, but with supernatural elements thrown in. It often feels like the movie is trying to go the route of the supernatural things being in Detective Thorne's head, but then you remember that this is a Hellraiser film and realize he must be in his own personal hell, which is what is revealed by Pinhead later in the film. Pinhead and the Cenobites have been subjecting Detective Thorne to a type of psychological torture. If I remember my Hellraiser lore, and I don't, I believe this is the first time Pinhead has done something like this. Or at least this is the first time a Hellraiser film has centered around the psychological torture aspect of someone opening the box. At the end of the day, Hellraiser Inferno does not feel like the typical Hellraiser movie, at least up to this point. It's the fifth in the series and the first to try something different. Again, I think that's one of the reasons I really like this film. The second and third reasons are it's a detective film and more of a psychological thriller. The Cenobites take a back seat and we focus more on Detective Thorne's inner demons. It almost reminds me of a story inspired by a Silent Hill game. So here's the million-dollar question. Was Hellraiser Inferno even supposed to be a Hellraiser movie? There's some debate about that. Clive Barker confirmed that Dimension Films was open to another film after Hellraiser Bloodlines. Hellraiser Bloodlines was a bit of a train wreck. Ambitious for sure, but a mess nonetheless. I can imagine the studios didn't really think the juice was worth the squeeze for another Hellraiser sequel, but that's just speculation. There was a pitch for a fifth movie that was rejected due to budgetary reasons. That's when the studios decided to go the direct-to-video route. The Hellraiser Inferno script was given to Paul Harris Boardman and Scott Derrickson. I mentioned already that there was debate on whether or not this was intended to be a Hellraiser sequel. Boardman and Derrickson are on the record with saying that it was always intended to be a Hellraiser movie, whereas Doug Bradley, the man behind the pins, has stated that the script was rewritten as a Hellraiser script once Boardman and Derrickson were brought on board. I personally don't have any insight that differs from what I've read online, but like I said, Hellraiser Inferno does feel like a psychological thriller detective film first, and a Hellraiser sequel second. Pinhead was never in charge of torturing people for their sins before, and it feels like a weird character trait for him given how he acts in the first 4 films. In fact, I think a lot of the direct-to-video sequels were originally intended as a different movie before becoming Hellraiser films, but this one was the first, if you take Doug Bradley's word over the writers, which I do. Either way, I still highly recommend Hellraiser Inferno. Does it further the Hellraiser mythos in any way? No, not really. But it is a pretty decent psychological thriller. It's a fun addition to the Hellraiser series since it's the first movie in the series that changes things up. It's also one of my favorite direct-to-video sequels, which I'm including ones that went direct to streaming services too. And again, minus the new one since I haven't seen it. In fact, though, I can say I definitely purged some of the later films from my memory because they were just so bad. Oh wait, back on topic. So absolutely go check out Hellraiser Inferno, especially if you're into psychological thrillers and cop films. It's a great watch.